With a heavy sigh, the elderly high priest stepped out of the golden bathtub and began to dress himself in the precise attire mandated for this day. The bellowing of bulls and bleating of goats outside the tabernacle came clearly through the walls. The day was just beginning, and already he felt weary. It was the annual Day of Atonement, and the requirements of this day were demanding and exact. One misstep, one error, and he could bring guilt on the entire nation. Everything must be done exactly as God had prescribed through Moses long ago. Once he had finished the ceremonial washing and had donned the vestments necessary for this day, the priest would have to select a bull for his own sin offering, and then choose the 2 goats that would be required for the people's sin. He would sacrifice the bull and collect the blood. He would sprinkle the blood in the Holy of Holies. The lot would be cast to determine the fate of the 2 goats. One would be killed as a sin offering. The other would be sent out into the wilderness, bearing the sins of the people after he had confessed their sins over it. He had been doing this for decades now. At first, it was an exciting privilege to be the high priest. He alone was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies, where he would offer the incense and sprinkle the blood that would atone for the sins of the past year. But after so many years, it now feels more like a heavy burden. How many more times would he be required to look into the eyes of a gentle animal and slaughter it? How much more blood would he have to collect and sprinkle on the altar? How many more goats would he send out to die in the surrounding desert? And yet it was never enough. The blood was never enough to completely erase their sins. It was never enough to achieve true forgiveness. Today he would offer the sacrifices to atone for this year's sins, but tomorrow the sins would start to accumulate again. The endless repetition made it hard not to feel a deep and absolute sense of futility. Centuries later, another high priest would walk through the streets of Jerusalem. But this high priest was not wearing any ceremonial garments. In contrast, this high priest was stripped nearly naked. This high priest would not even enter the temple on that day. He would not hear the sound of animals waiting to be sacrificed. Instead, he would hear the sarcastic taunts of Roman soldiers and the angry shouts of his own people. He would not be respected as the temple high priest would have been. This high priest was completely different. His priesthood was not based on his ancestral lineage or on the legal requirements of Moses. This priest would not spill the blood of a bull or goat. He would not sprinkle their blood on any altar. Instead, this high priest would offer his own blood. This priest would allow himself to be slaughtered, allow his own blood to drain into the soil beneath him. And this high priest would atone for sins permanently, finally, and completely. This high priest would enter the true and heavenly Holy of Holies and remove for all time the barrier that prevented human beings from approaching the throne of God. No further sacrifice would be necessary. This high priest is Jesus, the one who has offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins. The necessity for repeated sacrifices of animals has been eternally replaced with the sole sacrifice of Jesus. The annual reminder of sins in the Day of Atonement has been replaced with a final forgiveness through which we are perfected for all time. Futility has been replaced with confidence before God's throne.